Alright, welcome everyone. In this tutorial we're going to do a patch angioplasty. On the screen here I have pretty much everything you're going to need, starting off with the suture. So whenever you're choosing a suture for anything that involves connecting blood vessels or maybe something like this, you want first of all a monofilament, okay? Because the braided types of sutures, they're going to be kind of intertwined like this. And whenever you're passing the suture through the blood vessel, that weaving creates a lot of friction in the blood vessel and it could damage it. So that's why you want, first of all, monofilament. Second of all, you want something that is not absorbable, okay? So I'm going to give you an example here. Here I have some monocryl. So like I said in my other video, the krills are going to be absorbable, okay? So the vicryl here is going to be a braided, so that means multifilament. Suture that's going to be absorbable in the body. And then you have the monocryls. This is going to be used for dermis, so it's going to be absorbable, right? Because you just want time for that thing to heal together, for the dermis to come together. But in this situation, you actually want something a little bit more permanent because you don't want anything to come apart in the blood vessel. So that's why you do a non-absorbable, that's monofilament, okay? Now for the actual tools themselves, here I would suggest doing the Bakey forceps. Do not use Adsons as they have teeth and they're going to damage and puncture your blood vessel. Here I got some Kellys, okay, and these are not going to be used for the actual anastomosis, but they're going to be used to hold the suture, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. For needle drivers, you have two options. You can use a Castro or a needle driver. This is going to give you more precision, especially for those small sutures. So great option here. You cannot go wrong with either one of these. And of course some suture scissors, and here I got some Mayos. Alright, let me zoom in to get started with this technique. So I'm going to use a scalpel here to cut into a blood vessel. In real life, use something like a pot scissors, and these are just scissors that create very small openings. But essentially, let me go ahead and mark this to figure out what my angioplasty is going to be. So I'm going to start it here, and I'm going to end it somewhere around there. So first of all, what are we doing here and why? So the patch angioplasty is really designed to close blood vessels together after you made an incision in them for whatever reason, maybe like a carotid endarterectomy, right? You're cutting into the carotid to remove the atherosclerosis. Whenever you suture blood vessels together, right, and you sew it just like normally, you create a very small opening. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. See how I close this blood vessel together, but the lumen gets a little bit smaller because these two edges evert. You kind of want to avoid that with blood vessels because you want them to stay patent and big and make sure blood flow, everything flows nicely through them. Don't mind these smudges here, but first for preoperative planning, I need to figure out how big this incision is because it's going to make, or whenever I make my actual patch, it's going to dictate how big I make it. So in this case, it's going to be about 3 centimeters or so. Alright, so let's pretend like we harvested a vein from somewhere else, right? So you have this piece of tissue that you basically want to make into a sort of lemon shaped, something like that. That's going to fit in the length of this 3 centimeters. Alright, so here's my patch, and that's going to sit on top like so, okay? So now that we have that prepared, I'm going to put it outside, and I'm going to make my first incision here in the center, and then I'm going to use scissors to open it. So the wrong blade for this, I mean, I don't really have a good blade. It's not even attached correctly, but it's a 22 blade. It's used for a big skin. After you make your puncture incision, you can go ahead and open it up like so. Alright, now that my incision is nice and open, I can go ahead and get started with the technique here. I'm going to show you how to do this. So Alright, so here's some principles with anastomosing and handling blood vessels. Typically, you want to avoid something like this, where you're really grabbing onto that tissue. This is Penrose tubing, so it's really forgiving, but in real life, whenever you compress these blood vessels, you can injure them, and that might cause something bad down the line, maybe like a thrombus or something. So here's kind of the technique that I've seen, where you open this up with a DeBakey forceps, and then you pass the needle kind of in between, right? That way you're not damaging the blood vessel. The very first throw is going to be from outside to the inside of the blood vessel at the apex, okay? And here it's always very important to take into consideration whether you're in the inside of the blood vessel or the outside. So right now we're on the inside, which means that my next pass here on this tissue is going to be from the inside to the outside. You see, so you got to keep in mind what pattern you're using at all times. So I know I said to not grab the tissue, but I'm not really sure how else to do this. And by the way, they do have forceps that are non-traumatic to blood vessels. So a bit of a contradictory statement there, but alright. Once you pass it through, go ahead and protect your needle. And here's kind of the technique. So with these Kelly forceps or mosquitoes, I've seen a lot of them have a piece of rubber in the ends. That way it doesn't damage the suture material. But what you want to do is grab on to the very tail end of the suture, like so, and clamp it. What I'm going to do next is that I'm going to go ahead and lodge it there, so that way you can see it. I'm going to stabilize it, that way my suture has some sort of tension as I'm suturing. It has something to hold on to. I'm going to bring my angioplasty down. And I'm going to secure it there, okay? So now that that's done, hopefully you, a lot of times in the OR, you're going to have someone doing something like this, right? And that really allows you to see what you're doing, and it keeps the suture out of the way. It helps keep some sort of traction to make sure you can do your next throw easier. Since I don't have that, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But really what you want to avoid is crossing your suture. So I'm going to pull this aside a little bit. And notice that we're on the outside of the blood vessel, which means that the next throw has to be on the inside. So I'm going to move this aside, and I'm going to make my throw here. And I'm going to continue this pattern all the way through. So I'm going to see you back when I'm at the apex, okay? Something that I failed to talk about in the beginning of the video is the fact that there's different types of sutures. You have your cutting and your non-cutting needles. And with the cutting, there's two categories. You got the reverse cutting and then the regular cutting. So what does it mean by the cutting needle? Essentially, the cutting needles have a bit of an edge to them, like a little bit of a triangle. And depending if the triangle's at the top part or the bottom part of the needle, is going to dictate whether it's reverse or regular. In this case, we have a reverse cutting needle because this top side of the suture is nice and flat. The bottom part has the triangle, right? And that's more commonly what I've seen in the OR, because whenever you're cutting into a tissue, a lot of times you're putting a lot of torque on this part of the needle, right? So if you have a normal cutting needle where the edge is here at the top, it's going to really slice there. It's going to create more trauma than if it's on the bottom side. Setting that aside, whenever it comes to suturing blood vessels together, you want something that doesn't have any edge to them. So you want something called a taper point needle, right? Essentially, there's no edge. Everything is nice and flat. It's circular, and it's not going to traumatize the tissue, especially something as delicate as blood vessels. This is where anastomosis get a little bit tricky, because now I'm somewhat close to the apex. So this next throw here is going to be a backhanded throw, right? So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna reverse my needle. I'm gonna load it backhanded. I'm gonna use some gentle traction here, and I'm gonna go right at the apex, right? So once I come out of the apex, I want to make sure I'm coming into the apex here on my patch. So something like that. Alright, so at this point of the patch angioplasty, I finished all the way down to the apex, right? And now I'm here. So since I'm outside of the blood vessel, I need to go into the blood vessel, but on the other side. So that means that from now on, it's going to be a backhanded run all the way down to the very end. Once I get to the very end, I'll show you, but essentially you come out and then you're going to start, tying knots with this string over here, and you're done. I mean, that's pretty much it. So the technique I like here, maybe some traction is going to help. It is kind of tricky. Another thing that I've seen surgeons do is using some sort of traction, using some sort of something like that. I can take this in one bite. Nope. It might be easier to take in one bite. So essentially, I don't want to cross my suture over, so I'm gonna make it into a loop. Make sure nothing is touching. Make sure everything glides nice and easy. Okay, so I'm on the inside of the blood vessel, so I need to come out. So again, backhanded throw, and I'm gonna aim for something very close to the edge here, across from where I made that throw on the inside there. So maybe somewhere around there, right there. That should be good. So a little bit of traction. There's a little bit of traction there to help me. And then come out. Make sure I'm not crossing over. Pull out the suture and try to reload close to the incision for efficiency. And there you go. So I'm just going to follow this pattern all the way down, okay? Alright, so I think this is a pretty good stopping point because I'm right across on the other side from the original incision, which was on the blood vessel side, and now I came out through the patch side. So at this point, you can go ahead and let go of this, or you can keep it connected. Essentially, we're just going to do some knots. You can do instrument ties, you can do hand ties, whatever you find the most comfortable. I think with the hand ties, you can get a very good feel of how tight things are and the tension that you're putting on the string. You know, if I did leave my tail a little bit short, so it is somewhat difficult to make these throws, especially the front hand one-handed. In that case, you can always switch to a two-handed technique. So the two-handed technique is done basically on the side that's a little bit longer. So this is a little bit longer side, so I'm gonna, the needle end is the one that you're turning the thing around. Okay, so at this point, go ahead and leave a bit of a tail, because you know, since it's a monofilament, it's gonna slide, right? So you know, you do want to be somewhat generous with the tail, maybe a little bit less than a centimeter. Again, a pinky is about a centimeter, so somewhere around there. Twist, that looks good, and I'm gonna cut there. All right, finished product. It is a bit tricky, but this is how it came out. You know, it does kind of cave in, but I just think it's because the material that is the Penrose tubing is pretty elastic. In real life, you know, the blood vessels are soft, they're pliable, so it accommodates this and it looks better, right? But essentially, we accomplish the goal that we're maintaining blood flow through the blood vessel without compromising resistance, right? Otherwise, we're going to create a smaller lumen here for blood to flow through, and that's not going to allow for the proper dynamics of blood flow. So this is going to maintain that in a blood vessel type of scenario. Now, the patch angioplasty is even a good vessel for if you want to do some sort of anastomosis. I've even seen it done for a CABG, right? So instead of taking the internal mammillary artery and directly making an incision on the coronary artery to put, you know, the internal mammillary on there, I've seen a patch angioplasty done and then the anastomosis. So that's going to be a future video where I show you how to do the different types of anastomosis. You know, you got end to end, end to side, but I'll get into that at a later time. But yeah, thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful for you.